FM.
On June 5th, the choice is clear. James Ramos for State Assembly. James Ramos is tackling homelessness in our community, finding permanent housing for more than 400 veterans. Now he's helping homeless youth and families find housing. James Ramos is fighting to keep us safe. San Bernardino County Police and Sheriff support James Ramos for Assembly. We need him in the State Assembly, fighting for us. James Ramos for State Assembly. Paid for by People for Better Government Committee of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. Not authorized by a candidate or a committee controlled by a candidate.
NBC News Radio, I'm Tom Roberts. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is reporting progress in high-level talks with senior North Korean officials.
Our two countries face a pivotal moment in our relationship in which it could be nothing short of tragic to let this opportunity go to waste.
The two sides are trying to find a way to salvage a planned June 12th summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Comedian Samantha Bee is apologizing for calling Ivanka Trump a vulgar name. Bee made the obscene remark about the president's daughter on her TBS show. President Trump is visiting Texas today to meet with students and families affected by the mass shooting at Santa Fe High School. 8 students and 2 teachers were killed when a young gunman opened fire on campus May 18th. President Trump says he's considering a pardon for TV personality Martha Stewart. Chatting with reporters on Air Force One today, Trump also said he's thinking about commuting the prison sentence of former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich. Several cities in the U.S. are setting rainfall records. Tom Roberts, NBC News Radio.
It's not just a home or a car. It's the 5 hours you spend in the kitchen mastering your epic wing recipe and the 3-hour family road trip to the tailgate party. While other insurance companies just see them as bundles or combos, State Farm agent Joe Amlani sees your home and car as the time and memories you put into them. Joe understands what your things really mean to you, and he's here to help you give them the protection that they deserve. Call State Farm agent Joe Amlani in Redlands for your home and auto insurance today.
Hey Ryan, do you have any beer in the fridge?
Nah, I thought you got some.
The game starts in 5 minutes.
And you drank the last beer at midnight on Friday.
I wish there was a place that delivered beer.
Yes, I'm Captain Crafted. I'm here to bring you beer. That's Captain, C-R-A-F-T''D. Why? Because there's no E, just a D, as in deliver, because Captain Crafted delivers.
That's right, the Crafted Beer Store in Redlands is now open for business with great prices and deliveries of your favorite beer, wine, spirits, water, ice, and mixers. Did I mention their great prices? That's CRAFTDBEER store.com or Fred Crafted Beer Store on Facebook.com. Make it easy. Google Redlands Beer Delivery. Look for Crafted Beer.
Crafted Beer Store in Redlands is now open for business, and I'm here to deliver.
Bob Vila here with my home improvement tip of the day. Winter's on the way, and that means homeowners are once again resuming their seasonal quest to get the most heat for the least money. If you have a fireplace that's inefficient, you might want to consider installing a fireplace insert. Most inserts are considerably more efficient than the fireplaces they replace. The best way to vent an insert is into a stainless steel liner that extends through the existing flue, from the top of the stove to the top of the chimney. That setup provides the highest efficiency, plus it's easy to inspect and clean. Though you can also vent the stove insert into the existing chimney, it's a bit trickier. That's because the proportions of the existing chimney may not match up with the size of the insert. If that's the case, the chimney won't draft properly, and besides getting smoke in your eyes every time you open the stove, you'll also get a rapid buildup of flammable, acid-laden creosote in the chimney. Get more info at bobvila.com and right here at home with me, Bob Vila.
On June 5th, the choice is clear. James Ramos for State Assembly. James Ramos is tackling homelessness in our community, finding permanent housing for more than 400 veterans. Now he's helping homeless youth and families find housing. James Ramos is fighting to keep us safe. San Bernardino County Police and Sheriff support James Ramos for Assembly. We need him in the State Assembly, fighting for us. James Ramos for State Assembly. Paid for by People for Better Government Committee of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. Not authorized by a candidate or a committee controlled by a candidate.
Erin here from On the Brink Morning Show, where we talk about all that is engaging in the Inland Empire. News, politics, business, family, things to do, and so much more. Join us weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. on KCAA 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, and 1050 a.m. or on kcaaradio.com.
KCAA Loma Linda, your CNBC news station, where your business comes first.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I am on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing a false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help as many as possible overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And tonight we have a few things going. And by the way, I want to remind you, you can follow us on Facebook at Viewpoint with Father John, or go to our website at viewpointwithfatherjohn.com if you'd like to help support this show, because this is a listener-supported show. So go to our website, click on support, and you can help keep us on the air. A couple of announcements of upcoming events. On Saturday, July 14th, I will be doing a workshop on forgiveness with my good friend Martha Bass, and that will be in Claremont. We'll keep you updated. You can go to the website for the show or on our Facebook site, and you can click for more information, and we'll keep you up to date on that. And on July 20th, which is a Friday night at 7 p.m., I will be at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church doing a question and answer and book signing. So come and join us. I'll be there with Father Steve DeMuth, and we'll really have a wonderful time. Tonight, I have a great guest who I'm thrilled to have with us. Her name is Morgan Lynn, and she's an author and spiritual coach. She has a wonderful book called The Spirited Human, which I've really enjoyed reading. It's Proactive Tools for a Reactive World. And so I'd like to welcome her online, if I can get my lips to work tonight. Morgan, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing really well. I'm excited to talk to you too. I've really been looking forward to this.
I have as well, and I have to say I've really enjoyed your book. And let's talk a little bit about your spiritual journey, and then we'll get into the book a little bit, because I was fascinated in reading some of the forward stuff of how you got to where you are, and a couple of angels that have worked in your life. So tell us a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I was born, I feel like I have the quintessential story, like most, where you're born and you feel that there's something different about you, but you don't have the education, you don't have the terminology to really understand it. And
sure.
For me, that was, I was born an empath, which means I can feel things around me that I can't see. So it got very confusing. Sure. When I was a kid, and I was really nervous about it, so I shut it down for a really long time. And it wasn't until my late 20s where it kind of started turning back on. You know, it kind of came back on and then made itself known, and I felt a little bit more capable of handling it. But yeah, that's at the point where my angelic team, the guides and angels that work with me, started making themselves known to me, and it was a brand new conversation. So I had really very little understanding about what was happening. Now, was there a specific event that kind of clicked it back on, or did it just happen and you were aware that it was on? Yeah, it was like turning on a faucet really slowly. First it started dripping and then running a little faster. I just noticed things, and of course, you know, being a little bit older, I was a little more curious. I started reading books and taking some spiritual workshops, and good. I got a little bit more into it because I felt like I was, well, not vulnerable. You know, as a kid, you're vulnerable, and you feel like, you know, the world's a very big place. So I felt like I was capable of handling it at that point. Certainly. Now, was it a comforting experience? Was it scary? Was it kind of confusing? What's going on? Well, I'm chuckling because no, I actually didn't want it. I was very I didn't understand the process. I didn't understand what angels were and what they represented. And at that point in my life, I was very angry, and I didn't want anything to do with them. So I really argued with them for a long time. I pushed them away. I told them to go away. They didn't, of course, thank goodness. But I really tried. I tried my darndest to say, I don't want you. I don't want what you have. I don't want this. So, but no, they have their ways of just slowly breaking you down, but in a way that you're just being stubborn. So I finally got it.
No, I get that. I had some of that with my calling to the priesthood. I went through a lot of different things. Well, you're not worthy. Look at where you come from. You'll never have credibility. And anyone who grew up with you, what would they think? You know,
exactly.
So it really can be a difficult path to go on. And now, in addition to writing this book, you also do spiritual coaching, do you not?
I do. I went ahead, so when I finally just embraced it and gave into it and stopped being so dang stubborn, everything just flowed really well. And over the years, my guides and angels have, I call it, they have trained me. There's this process that they've walked me through that I thought it was just for me. I thought that they were, of course, helping me get my life in alignment. But then through the years, I realized, wow, it actually is working. So now I'm able to offer it to other people, and I'm seeing that it's working for them as well. So that's the blessing of being trained to be the teacher. So I'm really grateful for that.
I think it's something that Richard Bach wrote in his book Illusions, that learning is finding out what you already know, doing is showing that you know it, and teaching is showing others that they know it as well. Would that sound comparable to what you're talking about?
Yes, that's beautiful. I love that. Mm-hmm.
And I want, well, first of all, before I go to a part of your book, I just want to read, if I may. First, could you explain to our listeners, when you say guides and angels, what is your definition of that?
Well, I feel like, breaking it down into a quick answer, I feel like we are all born with our own, I call them the guidance team.
Okay.
And that is going to vary from person to person, and it's going to vary based on the trajectory that soul has planned for themselves, like who they want to be on this planet and what goals and achievements they want to try and shoot for.
Sure.
It will depend on ancestry. It will depend on the education that soul will need throughout their lifetime to get them to that end result that their soul is shooting for. And so guides and angels are your assigned team to help get you there. Because I feel like our soul has a plan, and it wants to get there. But in the grand game of being a human, we also forget the plan. So,
okay.
Yeah, and then the guides and angels, that they remember it. They remember the plan. And so they are there to help us not necessarily remember, but nudge us and support us and guide us to let us have the human experience of remembering.
Oh, very good. You know, you mentioned ancestry, and I once decided to look at my family tree, and I discovered most of my family was still in the tree. But it's, sorry, bad joke. And you have a quote from Carl Jung, who is one of my heroes, and I'm going to read that, if I may, real quick. To confront a person with his shadow is to show him his own light. Once one has experienced a few times what it is like to stand judgingly between the opposites, one begins to understand what is meant by the self. Anyone who perceives his shadow and his light simultaneously sees himself from two sides and thus gets in the middle. Mm-hmm. And that's in your part of your breadcrumbs, where you're talking about the house on the hill. And in the spirituality work I do, we talk a lot about dealing with the shadow self, and I'm glad that you covered some of that in your book, because I think that's a very misunderstood concept by so many people. As soon as you say shadow, as you say in your book, people think you're talking about demons, you're talking about evil things. No, the shadow, from where I was raised and taught, is just your false self. It's not bad, it's just not the true who you are. And the closer you go to the light, the longer the shadow is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the more you can see of it, the more you know you need to walk through, get through, give up to God, however you understand God,
Right.
so that you can get through that and discover the true self, as Tom Merton would describe it. What are your thoughts on that?
I love that. Shadow work is one of my very favorite conversations because I agree with you. It is one of those connotations that really drum up a lot of fear in people. And yet at the same time, I see the spiritual community and a lot of the religious community really trying to focus on just being a good person and just being a positive person, all the while putting away all of the things that we feel shame for or we hate or we don't want anyone to judge us over. And
Right.
the issue with that is, my big question is, how can you have wholeness if you're only focusing on half of the equation? You
Right.
cannot see, you cannot attain wholeness in self if you're only focusing on what we would call the light, the positivity of it all. And
Yeah. And
it's a conversation for people to get really in the nitty-gritty of who they are, and so it's absolutely one of my favorites.
And if God only loved what we call the good parts of us, then it wouldn't be a complete love. It'd only be a partial love, and that would be less than divine.
Yes, I agree with you.
And so I think the idea is from, if I'm hearing you correctly, we need to learn how to embrace it all, stop calling it bad, and use it for what it's there for, which is to help us become familiar with the light, because how do you know light if you can't compare it to darkness?
Right.
Yeah,
we live in a very contrasting world where it's good, bad, right, wrong, and we don't want to be bad people. We want to be good people, and so we've been trained to only turn our head and only focus on the good while acting like the bad's not there. And the downside to that is the shadow side isn't bad. It's, for me, I talk about where that's where we store all of our wounds, all of the things that we don't want to acknowledge, primarily because it was so painful when it happened. So we are ignoring wounds that aren't bad. They need our attention. And when we are brave enough to acknowledge the wound and give it what it needs to heal, that is how you have wholeness.
Yes. Well, one of the things you write in your book that I think has a lot of wisdom, and it's talking from the part where it says the house on the hill, where you can have this beautiful house, not a speck of dust anywhere, the furniture right where it's supposed to be, everything is gorgeous, but you keep putting bags of garbage in the basement, and so they'll be out of sight. But after a while, if you just leave the garbage in the basement, the stench starts coming up through the floor.
Yeah.
And the longer it stays, the more it gets mildewed and really gets unbearable. And so the idea is not to hide the garbage, but acknowledge the garbage and dispose of it correctly, which is what we do in spiritual therapy, divine therapy, as Father Keaton calls it, Thomas Keaton. So we're getting ready to come up on break, but I hope you'll stay with us for the next segment as well. For my listeners, we're talking to Morgan Lynn. She is the author of The Spirited Human, Proactive Tools for a Reactive World, and we're going to continue our conversation on the other side of the break.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personal funeral planning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
On June 5th, the choice is clear. James Ramos for State Assembly. James Ramos is tackling homelessness in our community, finding permanent housing for more than 400 veterans. Now he's helping homeless youth and families find housing. James Ramos is fighting to keep us safe. San Bernardino County Police and Sheriff support James Ramos for Assembly. We need him in the State Assembly, fighting for us. James Ramos for State Assembly. Paid for by People for Better Government Committee of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. Not authorized by a candidate or a committee controlled by a candidate.
And welcome back. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. And my guest tonight is Morgan Lynn, the author of The Spirited Human, Proactive Tools for a Reactive World. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this is what the book looks like. I highly recommend getting a copy of it. I found it to be a really good read. And Morgan, welcome back.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm on a personal level, I'm really glad you enjoyed it. So thank you.
Well, as a fellow author, I know it means a lot to know that somebody didn't just read the book, but they got something out of it. And every time I hear from one of my readers what they picked up from the book, it's like, okay. Because I don't know about your experience, but when my book first came out, I went through all the stuff as we do with the publishers and everything, and the anxiety and the palpitations, especially through editing. And then when the first hard copy came out, I decided I wanted to read it because I hadn't seen it in that format. Right. And as I read it, and I'm curious to see if you had this experience as well, I realized that there was parts of the book that there was no way that I wrote. That it wasn't somebody else, but there was something flowing through me, and I can actually see the fingerprint, if you will, of God writing through me. Did you have that experience in writing your book when you read it in print form?
Very much so. In fact, when I was going through the editing process, there are 3 or 4 places within the book that I absolutely know I didn't write that sentence. I didn't write that grouping, because the way the words came out, I know it wasn't me. And so, I tell people that the book is probably about 60% channeled, because once I connect to source, once I connect to that stream of consciousness, it just pours, and I get it out, and there it is on my computer, and my job is done. So that's very much my experience.
I used to joke with people, and I tell them I pray and write, because my best writing would come after my times of silence and meditation, where I'm not telling God what I think God needs to know. Instead, I'm listening. And particularly after a silent retreat, where I'm gone for a few days, speaking with no one, just silent meditation, and then it's like I cannot write fast enough. It's just coming through. So do you have those same experiences?
I did, actually. This book was in my mind and in my heart for about 10 years, and I was actively writing it for about 6, and that's only because of the insecurities, and I didn't think I had anything to say. But last summer, my guides came to me and they said, we need you to take a sabbatical. You need to stop everything so that you can finish the book. And as soon as I canceled my classes and my clients and I put everything aside, it really, I kind of just held up myself in my home, and I didn't really interact with a lot of people, and it just poured, because my human wasn't giving myself enough time to really sit down and connect, and I was just avoiding it, basically.
I'm so glad that you said 6 years, because my first book was like that. I'm working on another book right now, and there's times that I can write, there are times that I cannot write. And I've had a lot of people saying, well, when's the new book coming out? And I just say, it's not ready yet. It takes time for me to be in the zone and to find out what the universe, God, whatever your concept is, to flow through me, for me to get out of the way enough that the words can come through. Now, you mentioned you teach classes. You want to talk a little bit about the classes you teach?
Yeah, sure. I love anything that basically the foundation of all of my work is to support humans in remembering who they are, and that's the central intention of everything that I do. So some of the classes that come out of me, which are divinely inspired, I work with a lot of empaths, and so I love teaching. I like taking the empath that doesn't know they're an empath and then helping them understand that it's not a curse.
Right.
Because if you don't know, then you're going to be so overwhelmed that all you're really doing is just trying to survive. And I like taking them and educating them and walking them through proactive education and exercises and terminology and helping them turning it from a curse, and I call it, into a superpower, because it's a really cool superpower. So those are some of the classes that I teach.
Well, the Christian church as a foundation has not been very helpful with that. Usually we fear what we don't understand. And because of so much not understanding that these are natural gifts, they're gifts from God, automatically there are those in the Christian world that say, oh, that's evil, those are, they did the same thing to Jesus. You're healing by, Beelzebub, and Jesus says, well, if I'm healing by the devil, then how's the devil last? Because a house that stands against itself can't stand. And for all my people out there who are really good biblical scholars, I know I paraphrased, okay? I get it. You don't have to leave me an email. Sometimes we paraphrase. And yes, we Catholic and Orthodox do read the Bible. I know that's a big myth that we don't. So we do.
Just get it straight.
That's right. And, I've known some really incredible empaths. I got to do some work with, I don't know if you ever heard of Reverend I can't even say his name now, Reverend Richard Hill, no relation to Benny Hill. And he worked with Dr. Rocco A. Errico at the Nora Foundation for many years, and he might still. But I knew them when they were in Irvine. And when I first started discovering that I could pick up on people's feelings, and I was very uncomfortable with that, being Eastern Orthodox, it was baffling for me. And I'm not going to give you the whole conversation. Sometime when it's just you and I speaking, not over the air, I'll talk to you a little bit more about it if you'd like. But Richard was very much an empath. And in fact, he would tell me things that there was no way for him to know. Really impressed me, because I was really on the route to being a world-class skeptic. And he says, one of the things you don't like to acknowledge is you're an empath, and that's why you're a good counselor, is because when people are talking to you, you're not just hearing their words, you're hearing what they're not saying. Exactly. And I think that has helped me immensely. I don't use it solely for when I'm doing counseling, but I also don't rule it out either, because there's been times that I've said to clients, I understand what you're saying, but you want to tell me about this because I'm getting some feeling about this. And they say, how did you know? I said, well, that's not really important. Is that an issue? And they say, well, yes. I said, well, maybe we need to talk about that. So, wow. Do you have that sometimes happen with your clients?
I do, actually. Because I've worked on it for so many years, I've gotten it to a place where I can feel intention. I can feel motive.
Yes.
Like if I'm sharing with someone in a class or a session of sorts, I can tell that they're not telling me something. I can hear if they hear me, and it's a very interesting feeling, because if they're listening, my words go into them, and I can feel that. If they hate what I'm saying and they're rejecting it, my words bounce back and hit me back. If they're not present, my words go away, and I can feel my words kind of trail off like they're going down a train tunnel.
Oh,
and
that's a nice
description. It always fascinates me, because I can call them out on that. Like, I get you're really uncomfortable with what I'm saying, but, please hear that this is coming from love or whatever the situation is. And they're shocked because I'm hearing and feeling that they don't like what I'm saying to them. And it's handy. It comes in handy when you're doing this kind of work.
I call it learning to speak the language of the heart.
Yes. Oh, I like that.
And I for me, that's where it kind of generates, and I'm not necessarily talking about organ, but the heart of the essence of who we are, and that is connected to every other living thing. I mean, science has come to show that it's all connected. We're all made of stardust. Every element that's in the universe is in each one of us, which connects us, and that the energy is not in the expression itself, but in the space between it. And that's where all the energy of the universe is. And so the space between you and I is a powerful place, and it's not disconnected. It's just that dark matter that we can't define. And so that's why I think religion and science are not incompatible. I think they're two dance partners that have been apart for too long. I think they belong together to help us understand each other, but we speak two different languages, so we need to learn how to translate one language to the other.
I like that you said that. I really do. I enjoy speaking about being empathic on a scientific level because I agree with you. Being empathic means we have our information coming into our heart chakra.
Right.
So that space where the heart is. And so that's how we're, if you want to say, reading the environment that we're in. But in a scientific language, we are collecting vibrational frequencies. It's why we can feel our environment. And
Yes.
so we're collecting that data, which is just vibrational frequency. And that's what I mean by taking the empath that doesn't know they do it and turning them into this person that knows they're doing it. All of that process is teaching them to determine and read and translate that vibrational frequency to understand what's within their field. So
Right.
I agree. I love that you said that spirituality and science are starting to meld together in this
Right.
really beautiful dance. I love the way you said that.
Thank you. Well, there's one more part I want to throw in that I think is so important, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong. If I'm hearing you correctly, part of the process is learning how to trust yourself and to trust that intuition that is not just, oh, maybe that's a fleeting thought, but you may actually be picking up something and learn how to honor that, trust that, follow up on it so you can see if the data matches. Would that be a fair statement?
That is exactly the way I explain it. You used exactly the same language because I feel, especially for empaths, because we're so soft-hearted, we have a tendency to have been beaten down a little bit through life because we're so out there. Our hearts are exposed a little bit more than others. And we learn to not trust because when we put ourselves into the world, we get clobbered.
Yes.
So then we go, oh, I shouldn't do that. Oh, I shouldn't do that. So over the years, we've learned to be guarded and hard. We harden ourselves. So the number one step for anybody that feels like they're an empath, it's not about trusting other people. We've got to get our self-trust back.
Right.
And one of the statements I say, because I know humans love our evidence, and you know, for empaths, when you feel something but we don't have a lot of evidence, we go, oh no, I'm just sensitive, or I'm just tired, or whatever. We'll kind of shoo it away.
Sure.
But I started saying things like, I don't know what's going on, but I know something's going on. And so it's a statement that simultaneously is saying, I don't have all of the answers, but I'm still going to trust myself and just hold it there for a little bit until I get enough information to see if I'm correct. And that has actually really helped me a lot with my own self-trust and being able to navigate the world so that I'm not, just putting my heart out there and getting it clobbered all the time.
Right. And part of that's, again, coming back to finding out who you really are. And I know some wonderful people that unfortunately, through their religious experience, I'm not trying to knock religion, at the same time, religion can either be the greatest catalyst to faith or the greatest obstacle, depending on how it's used. And they have tremendous abilities. I've worked with some of these people, but they deny themselves because whatever church they're going to tells them, oh, that's bad, that's not really good. And it reminds me of a scene. I know this is going to sound a little bit corny, but I am corny. This is your vegetable serving today, a full cup of corn. I don't know if you ever watched the movie Hook with Robin Williams.
Yes, love that movie.
There's a line in that movie that I wouldn't give you $2 million for because I bawl like a baby because of what it means to me. When Robin Williams meets Wendy Lady, he's come back to Never Never Land, or he hasn't got to Never Never Land yet, but he's getting ready, and he's now afraid of flying, and he's doing all these things, and she says, "Why you become a pirate?" But she says another line, because he's so skeptical of all the stuff he knew when he's a child, and she says to him, "Why, Peter, you've forgotten who you are." And when I hear that line, it touches to me about a spiritual problem that we have in our society where we have forgotten who we are. Who we are as spiritual entities and creations created not just from spirit but of spirit. And part of our religious discourse or spiritual discourse, I believe, is to get introduced to who we were before we had a face, as they say in the Buddhist tradition. Yeah. What's your experience with that?
That's really beautiful, and I 100% agree with you. In fact, that is a big premise of why I wrote the book I wrote, was I feel like we are born with full knowledge of where we've come from and what we're doing and where we're going, but life just has a way of domesticating us and kind of watering it down, and we learn very quickly the survival technique of being able to maneuver a chaotic world, and so we cut away the pieces and parts of us that are our magic, that is our beauty, that is our talent, because we're just trying to blend in, because that's the safest way to navigate as a child, as a young adult. The problem is when we become adults and we have full reign over our lives, we have forgotten it, and now we are just full-on domesticated adults, paying bills, doing our jobs, washing dishes, just getting through life. I want people to remember who they are.
Right.
Of course, we're here to have the beautiful, mundane human life, but we came here for a reason, and each person has a different reason. And if we could just take off, like I tell people, over the years, you've put on all of these coats and jackets and sweaters, and now you're so weighed down, you don't remember what you look like. And so part of my work, it's not about helping them find something that's missing, because I actually don't feel like anything's missing.
Right.
I try to get them to take off the layers, because if they can get to the core of who they are, you have instant memory. And so this is what I feel like the human life is about.
Beautiful. I like that a lot. And it makes a lot of sense. And you use a statement that I think is powerful. The beautiful, mundane life. And it's not a matter of either or, it's a matter of and. They're included with each other, and it's finding the beauty in the everyday mundane that does make it so we can see the shimmering light behind the mundane part of living. And it's really not a bad thing.
No, I think too many people vilify and are angry at the human experience. But we came here, people. We're here. We might as well get involved and get invested. But you can also add things to your mundane that can make it fantastical. You don't have to, I agree, it doesn't have to be just mundane or beautiful. You can have it all. It's all in the mindset.
Well, one of the things I tell people quite often, because I do a lot of funerals, I really do, and I tell people I'm not afraid of dying. Dying doesn't scare me. What does scare me is dying without living first. And I think it's important that we do learn to live before we go on to the next experience, because this is just my opinion, but I believe that until we learn our lesson from the experience, we must re-experience the lesson. But when history repeats itself, the price goes up. And we're getting ready to go to break. On the other side of the break, I'd like to talk a little bit about learning how to live our bliss, and because I think that's a very important part of living, that finding our right work, our right path. And so we'll be back in just 2 minutes.
My name's Craig Ebel. Join me Saturday mornings at 5 a.m. for my show, It's Polka Time. Start your weekend off with the biggest and best variety of polka music over KCAA 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM on your radio dial, also streaming online at kcaaradio.com. It's Polka Time with me, Craig Ebel, Saturday mornings at 5, right here at KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, K292 FQ Riverside, and K293 CF Moreno Valley.
On June 5th, the choice is clear. James Ramos for State Assembly. James Ramos is tackling homelessness in our community, finding permanent housing for more than 400 veterans. Now he's helping homeless youth and families find housing. James Ramos is fighting to keep us safe. San Bernardino County Police and Sheriff support James Ramos for Assembly. We need him in the State Assembly, fighting for us. James Ramos for State Assembly. Paid for by People for Better Government Committee of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians. Not authorized by a candidate or a committee controlled by a candidate.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
And welcome back, friends. You are tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. And a couple reminders. Again, on Saturday, July 14th at 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., my friend Martha Bass and I will be doing a workshop on forgiveness in Claremont. You can go to the Facebook page, Viewpoint with Father John, or our website, viewpointwithfatherjohn.com. And as we get updates to the address and such, we will put that out there. And the charge will be $35 for the daily event, and it includes lunch. And I don't know anywhere in Claremont you can get a good lunch for $35 and a good workshop. Also, on July 20th, I will be making an appearance. I still don't get used to that phrase. At Holy Trinity Church in Covina at 7 p.m. There'll be a question and answer and book signing where you can come and we'll talk a little bit about the book. Now, the book is Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me. That's the book. You can either buy a copy there at the book signing, or you can go online at Amazon.com and you order a book. And it's I'm going to say it's the best $10 you'll ever spend, and the best royalty I'll ever get. Now, if you want to help support this show, please go to viewpointwithfatherjohn.com, click on the support button. They can do PayPal or credit cards. You can do a one-time gift, or you could be a sustaining member. Remember, this is your show, and you're part of a family that keeps us on the air. Now, having said all that, again, I have a wonderful guest this evening, Morgan Lynn, the author of the book, The Spirited Human, Proactive Tools and for a Reactive World. I'm sorry I messed up your book there. And as we talked about going into the break, one thing I try to talk with some of my clients about who come to me for counseling and also spiritual care is learning to find your bliss. Whatever your work is, you have a life work. And rather than just sticking to a job for security, which if you need to do that, okay. But if you really want to live life, find out what your bliss is, do that, and let the money come to you. What are your thoughts on that kind of approach?
Yeah, I like that conversation. I think in the ego and the human, like we talked before about the mundane world, there's this romanticized version of what bliss means. And right. I feel like people are a little misunderstanding around like what exactly that means. And so I try to put it into a place where I call it find your alignment. Because when you have your alignment, you are making decisions that are going to lead you to your bliss. Because I feel like the issue is that when the human wants something but they don't know what they want, then they kind of don't move anywhere. They stay where they are because that's known and it's safe. And then we get this big romanticized picture of what bliss means, and we kind of like spray the roses all over. We try anything and everything to figure out if that's what that is, which wastes a lot of time, it wastes a lot of energy. I feel like when we are in our alignment, and what that means to me is when I am making choices that serve my highest good, and there is a very simple test to know if you're doing that. If you're about to make a decision and it feels light, that's alignment. If it feels heavy, it isn't. And I know that sounds super simple, but it's that easy, because when we are paying attention to how we feel and how our body is and how our emotions are and what we're thinking about those emotions, when we are in alignment, it's going to feel light. And when we're getting off of our path or off of our center, it'll feel heavy, it'll feel strained and arduous, like we have to put a lot of effort into it.
Well, so, yes, like when you're riding a bicycle, sorry to interrupt you, and you're in the wrong gear.
No. Yeah.
And you got to change gear, and you realize you don't have to pedal so hard when you were in the right gear, and things just seem to move along better. Would that be a good analogy of that?
I like that a lot, actually. I might borrow that.
It's all yours. It came from the universal. It's universal. What do they say? Copyright on it.
There you go.
and as you know, as writers, after you use something 3 times, it's then yours.
Oh, bonus! I didn't know that rule. Yeah, I'm going to start doing that.
You give credit to the author 3 times, and then after that, you just kind of own it. Now, before someone sends me a letter from a lawyer, it's a joke, folks. Lighten up. So, sometimes people take something so serious. It's like, it's okay. Yeah. True spirituality involves laughter. And I say many times, never trust a spiritual director that doesn't have a sense of humor.
Oh, my gosh. That is so true. That's so true.
Because they're trying to make you into a statue like they're trying to be, and life's not about being a statue. Statues are to look at, not to live.
Yeah, I agree.
So, well, this is a wonderful conversation, and I'm really enjoying having you on the show. And again, I really want to recommend your book, The Spirited Human, Proactive Tools for a Reactive World, because there's a lot of insights in here. And I love some of your headings, the harmony, the weaving, I should say weave, is not, there's no ing on it. And how to learn how to honor yourself and listen to yourself. I think that's what true spirituality is. It's not learning so much how to be somebody else, but how to discover who you are. My friend Chuck Chamberlain, Richard Chamberlain's father, the actor, Chuck had a lot to do with me finding my calling to go into the priesthood. And he used to say, we don't need 1 more ounce of self-improvement. What we need is self-discovery.
Oh, yes.
And it sounds like what you're doing in your ministry, if I may call it that, is taking people on the path to self-discovery so that they can really learn the world that they're in a true sense. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's lots of teachers in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We can gather and collect information from others. That's what this world is all about, is to be able to share knowledge and pass them down generation to generation.
Yes.
But I feel like at the end of the day, we must be able and willing to go within for our answers. And then if you have that relationship with self, now everything on the outside of you is a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a viable suggestion, of course, like that it's there for that reason. But when we lean on the external answers and then negate our internal answers, now we're really at the mercy of those teachers. They can steer us in any direction of our lives if we're not checking in from time to time and asking, does this align with me?
Right. Well, it reminds me of a story that I stole from Chuck Chamberlain, and I use it quite often, but I heard I gave him credit. And it's the story about the three fish who are swimming around in the Bay of Laguna, which, if you've ever been to Laguna, you know it's quite a place. A lot happens there, and I keep trying to get transferred there. And these three fish weren't doing too much. They're kind of milling around when this great fish swam up and said, "Morning, boys. Isn't the water grand?" And he swam off. And the three fish looked at each other, and he said, one of them says, "The old boy talked about water. You hear this water?" He said, "I've never heard of it." So I turned to the other fish and asked him, "Have you heard of this water?" He said, "Well, I know it exists because the great fish said that there's water." So they decided perhaps they better find this water. And so they swam the 7 seas in search of the water in which they lived, moved, and had their being. And so it is with us. What we've come here looking for, we've come here looking with, nearer than hands and feet, closer than breathing. And it sounds to me that how you are guiding people is to realize that what they've been looking for, they're looking with. Does that go with what you're teaching?
Yeah, it's really the intention, and I appreciate your words because I've never actually put it into words before, and so I'm grateful for that. Yeah, I feel like we have it. We already have it, but there's this mindset that it's missing and that we have to search for it, and it's under some rock in some mountain in some other country, and if we don't find that thing before we die, then we will fail. And I see a lot of people running around the planet like mad, trying to find this missing thing, and we've got to stop that because we have everything we need already within. It's just buried.
Right.
That's the work I like to focus on is stop and take a breath. Now let's go in instead of going out.
Sure, it's like looking for your glasses when you're wearing them.
Which I do often.
I'm glad I'm not alone in that endeavor.
Nope.
Hey, I'm at that age that when you walk into a room and you remember why, it's a real good day.
You're like, yes,
yes.
4-1.
I've had an accomplishment, you know. So
nice.
You know, it sounds like there's a lot of areas where we really align with things, and I want to share with my listeners that that's what real spirituality is. Spirituality isn't a name of a product. Spirituality connects to everything around it, and you see the connections, and it doesn't matter what you call it. It matters how you live it. And I think we get so caught up in what's the name of it, what was the author of it, because if it's truth, if it's real truth, it's not just true in one place, it's true everywhere. And it doesn't matter who said it. And,
truth is truth.
Truth is truth. And again, Morgan, I really want to thank you for being on the show. It's been a treat having you here. And you're an absolute delight. And I hope that sometime in the future we'll do this again. Because it sounds like you have many things to share with my listeners. And how would they get a hold of you if they want to be in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way would be my website. I think that has a list of my bio and my services, and you can even get the book that way. My website is my name, MorriganLynn.com.
Very good. And we're hooked up on LinkedIn, so if you would do me a favor, as we say in Hebrew, a mitzvah, if you would message that to me, I'll put it on my website if you like, so that my listeners during the week who'd like to be in further touch with you and learn more about your book and learn about some of the classes you teach and maybe even do some spiritual consulting with you, they can be in touch with you. Would that be all right?
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. Yes, thank you.
Well, you've been a wonderful guest, and I thank you for being with us tonight. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future. And I like to follow what you're doing and help support you in your important spiritual work.
I really appreciate it. I have really enjoyed connecting with you, so thank you very much for having this time with me.
You're very welcome. God bless. And listeners, I thank you for being with me tonight. Now, we're not quite to the end yet. I just want to go over a few things. Again, I want to thank the best board operator, sound engineer, the King Kong of the microphone is Brandon, my buddy here, who keeps me on the air, and he makes sure that I don't have Oreo cookies on my beard when I go on the air. And he reminds me that there are 7 words that are given by the great George Carlin that I'm not to use if I don't want to get letters from the federal government and from certain listeners. I also want to thank across the studio from me my beloved wife Gabby, who also keeps me in line. She's known as She Who Must Be Obeyed, El Jefe, and the smart one of the team. This is always a joy to be with you, and I really want to emphasize that the only reason we're on the air is because of you. And so if you haven't done so yet, please go to the website, viewpointwithfatherjohn.com, click the support button, and contribute. I always hate putting on my beggar shoes and doing that, but if I don't do that, then we will not be on the air. And so I'm grateful to everyone who has given so far. And if you haven't, and you're really enjoying the show, even if it's $5, whatever you can give. We're not out there looking for Daddy Warbucks. I say that because I have a friend of mine who's starring in Annie right now over at the Candlelight Pavilion in Claremont. But, every little bit helps. There's an old story about a beggar who goes up to a door back in the old times during the wars when people would be traveling and they would stop at people's houses and ask for food. And so he tells this lady, I have this magic stone that makes the most beautiful stew, most beautiful soup. Would you like to see it work? She says, well, absolutely. So she invited him in, and he says, I need a pan of water. So he gets a pan of water, takes this beautiful stone, and he washes it in the sink, and he puts it in the pot, and he says, well, that's a good start. He says, what might make it a little better? If you have any carrots. So she runs and she says, I think I have carrots. She looks in the refrigerator and she finds some carrots. About that time, a friend comes over and asks, what are you doing? She says, oh, this guy came to the door. We're making this stone soup, and it's supposed to be delicious. You want to come see? I'm just adding some carrots. So the friend comes in and says, oh, that's very interesting. And so he says to the new visitor, well, the carrots are good. Some potatoes might make it even better. She says, well, I have some potatoes. So she runs home and gets the potatoes, and they bring them, wash them, cut them up, put it in there, and they said, oh, it's smelling wonderful, and if you have some salt and pepper, and someone else brought that, and by that time, someone who's been watching this comes in the house and says, well, hey, what are you guys doing? And, well, we're making this stone soup, this rock soup. She says, well, it smells good. Well, if we had a little chicken, that might make it a little better. And the guy says, well, I'm a butcher. Let me go get some chicken. So he went and got some chicken. They cut it up and do whatever it is they do before they put it in the soup, because I don't cook. And so they do that, and it's smelling really good. And someone else says, well, maybe some tomato. Well, next thing you know, this thing is full, has a wonderful aroma, and everyone's enjoying the soup. What they don't realize is they all came together, and the soup was so delicious because it took every one of them. The stone was just to start it. And so be that stone for the soup. So people come together with you, and you find the deliciousness in life, the soup that we all share. And so as we are coming to our final 2 minutes, I just want you to know that you've made my life more delicious by being a part of the show. Again, I hope you'll come to the things that we're doing on July 14th with Martha Bass and myself, the forgiveness workshop. And again, we'll keep you updated on the site. We're just trying to finalize where we're going to do it. We have a target. And also on July 20th with Father Steve DeMuth at Holy Trinity Church in Covina at 7 p.m. That will do the Q&A and the book signing. But more than anything, I want you to know that I am so honored that you take the time to tune in. And I hope you'll go out and you'll get my book, Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me, because I would like to reach out to you that way as well. And maybe you can share some of your thoughts you've had with the book. Come to the book signing and be a part of the dialogue so you can ask questions that you have. But most of all, know that you're valued. And if no one has told you this week that they love you, let me be the first. We'll be back next week. God bless.
On June 5th, the choice is clear. James Ramos for State Assembly. James Ramos is tackling homelessness in our community, finding permanent housing for more than 400 veterans. Now he's helping homeless youth and families find housing. James Ramos is fighting to keep us safe. San Bernardino County Police and Sheriff support James Ramos for Assembly. We need him in the state